Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webcast, giving you a preview of POWERGEN International, which will be less than 3 weeks away, November 19th through 21st in New Orleans. I'm Rod Walton, Content Director for POWERGEN International. POWERGEN celebrates the revolution that is going on in the power generation sector, but here's a not too surprising fact about it. The revolution has always been going on. Power generators are constantly adapting to changes in technologies, resources, and etc. The difference now is that maybe 30 years ago when POWERGEN first began, those adaptations were in fits and starts, but this is revolution at a breakneck pace. There's the integration of renewables, digital transformation, microgrids, and the like. On the conventional side, nothing is more revolutionary than what's going on with natural gas-fired generation, with LNG and the shale plays. We're seeing changes on a global scale with that. We'll get to all of that, but first let me introduce our great webcast team today. We have Dan Shellady, who's Senior Business Development Manager with Varzilla and Chair of our On-Site Power Committee. We have Wendy Prabhu, who is Senior Communications Counsel for Clean Energy at Marcom Capital. And last but certainly not least is our moderator today, Kevin O'Donovan, who is social media influencer worldwide and world traveler. And I got to know Kevin at POWERGEN for the first time last year when we were in Orlando. We got to tour a gas-fired plant together, learned a lot. And Kevin, time is of the essence, so let's get started today.
Thanks, Rod, and good morning, good evening, and good night to everybody, depending on what time of the day or region of the world you're watching this in. As Rod said, last year was my first time at POWERGEN, and I learned a lot in terms of what's going on in that part of the industry that I hadn't been aware of too much in my career. Now, with the panel this morning, we're going to have a chat about some of the key topics and some of the things they're looking forward to as we go to POWERGEN in 2 weeks' time. And we'll also have a discussion on some of the, I suppose, the hot topics and some of the more contentious things that'll probably pop up while we're in or at POWERGEN and having a coffee, having a glass of water, or having a glass of beer. So I'd like to start off with Wendy. Wendy, renewables had a significant part to play in POWERGEN 2018. It's going to have a much bigger part to play this year. What are we going to see about renewables this year at POWERGEN?
Thanks, Kevin. Great question, and thank you for letting me be part of this webcast. I think you're right. Renewables, I think we're going to just continue to see renewables grow, not only at POWERGEN, but in the markets. You know, one area that's commanding attention is how we are incorporating renewables into the delivery of baseload power. You know, where are those obstacles and opportunities? I think these discussions are important because the POWERGEN market is facing two big challenges. You know, increasing power production to meet increased demand, and doing so while maintaining grid stability and lower emissions. I think addressing these challenges means the future of baseload is going to, it already is starting to include more renewables, but we can't do that without energy storage, especially long duration energy storage. And I believe we move beyond energy storage 101. So what I expect attendees to hear about and discussions on the floor are going to be about the large scale energy storage and the impact it will have on baseload power, especially as more and more renewables get added to the grid. A couple of the tracks that I'm particularly looking forward to are to see the utility scale case studies on energy storage. I want to see how those are performing beyond lithium ion, if we've got technologies beyond lithium ion. Also, I would like to see on the large scale solar PV systems design considerations. Are they being designed with energy storage and future baseload power in mind? Additionally, I'm going to be chairing a panel on onshore wind. I've got some great utilities and developers on that panel. Of course, we're going to be asking them what they're doing with wind, you know, beyond the expiration of the PTC, where they see that market going, and how they are going to be, if they are, and how they are going to be integrating energy storage into their platform to see if wind can turn into a future base load. And then I think there's a lot of consolidation we've already seen in the onshore wind market, particularly here in the US. And I think we will continue to see it. And I want to see if, I want to hear from the panel if they agree with that going forward in the future.
There's certainly no doubt that the impact of renewables, a couple of years ago was, well, I put a solar panel on my roof and somebody else put one wind turbine on the top of a hill somewhere. But the bulk deployment now, look at the wind farms in the US, the massive scale solar, etc. That really is changing the picture. We'll come back to that in a minute in the discussion. Now, Dan, when I went to POWERGEN last year, first time, I walked in, I think I said it to Rod on the Saturday afternoon when I was wandering around, I was going, God, there's a lot of generators here. And it suddenly dawned on me, well, it's POWERGEN, and there's an awful lot of places on the planet, in whether you call it a developed or a developing country, where there may not be a grid connection. And if you look at some of the disasters and things that are happening around the world today, people are going, hey, maybe we need to be more resilient. So there's an awful lot of technologies coming at the efficiency and new technologies around on-site generation. So Dan, what are we going to see around on-site generation this year?
Well, first of all, again, thank you for allowing me to give my view on what I think POWERGEN is going to be this year. First, I think, POWERGEN is going to still continue to cover those baseload power plants, whether they're gas-fired generation, whether they're coal-fired generation. But we are talking about a revolutionary market here. And Wendy's right on point when we're talking about baseload is really renewables are going to be providing the new baseload. It's going to happen slower in some regions, but other regions of the world it's going to be coming much faster. And as we move forward, I think looking at the on-site power track, I think we fit in very well with how the industry is moving towards this distributed generation model. And as you see solar and wind be more of a distributed generation asset, certainly energy storage is going to be playing a role. It's still a bit early for some of the economics of energy storage, but long term we feel it's going to play an important role. And those costs are going to be coming down, but still energy storage is not a long duration solution. And that's where we start to see on-site generation starting to become more important. As we move to distributed models, there's a lot of value in particularly quick start generation, and even communities looking at the attractiveness of owning their own on-site generation, and industry having their own on-site generation. And the way we structured our new on-site generation track, we're looking at 3 general areas. One of the first ones is really innovation. So what innovations do we have going on in on-site power solutions? And some of those innovations are looking at new technologies in on-site generation. In fact, our company, Wärtsilä, we're introducing one of the brand new engine technologies that's a large step in efficiency. And we have other engine manufacturers that are really starting to grow into this on-site power generation space. So we're excited about that. There's innovation in utilizing engine power plants with on-site storage, where you can do a hybrid model integrating energy storage and reciprocating engines. We also are looking at other innovations that are related to efficiency. One of our tracks is specifically geared towards efficiency and cogeneration type applications. In fact, the Department of Energy has a couple of papers on our one track at on-site generation, where we're looking at how to look at those models for cogeneration and getting that efficiency at the local distribution level. Another area is this whole resiliency. Not only do we have on-site generation becoming important to back up those renewables, along right now, they're the primary backup for renewables before energy storage really becomes fully implemented. And the backup value is only part of it. You also have the resiliency as far as having on-site generation be of value to the community when a community may be affected by either a hurricane or an earthquake or any type of, right now in California, we see wildfires are impacting the grid. So, what's the solution? Really, this distributed generation model is becoming it's coming to the forefront where people can put on-site generation more at a local level that does that, provides that resiliency, and also provides that flexibility to back up the renewables. So, it's the world's in transition. Certainly, these large central station power plants are going to continue to play a role in our future, and I'm glad that POWERGEN is continuing to support that. But I think it's exciting that we're really looking at where the industry is moving in the future to more distributed generation and integrating those renewables with resiliency and reliability that may be provided by on-site generation.
Dan, you just listed off, a bunch of new technologies and innovation around on-site power. And, for a couple of years, people were saying, oh, well, we'll all go to renewables and it'll be all fine and the base load will disappear and blah, blah. But then as you mentioned, with, look at what's happening, the terrible situation in California where you can't rely on the grid. So it'll change the paradigm on whole base load and resiliency. And we'll come back to that in the discussion in a few minutes. Now, Rod, Wendy and Dan just called out, renewables and storage and baseload and on-site power and. When I look at the amount of experiences and the way you've evolved POWERGEN for 2019, you have a whole lot of new stuff. You're the traditional baseload technologies, they're not going away, but yet you have things like LNG. You have a whole lot of new stuff as well this year, right?
That's correct, Kevin. We do. We have a whole lot of new stuff. We have sort of formatted in different ways. We still have the summits. We have 7 summit tracks, and they run the gamut from gas-fired turbines and plants. We also have a future of coal-fired generation track, the on-site power. We have digital transformation. We also have 6 knowledge hubs this year. Last year was our first year for the knowledge hubs, which are on the exhibit floor, and we had 4 of them. These 6, we got decentralized energy, we have natural gas, future of conventional power, smart power plant, wind and solar, and then a hydro hub as well. And so it's going to cover all of that different ground. And it's interesting you mentioned the LNG part, which is, LNG is not a generation form, it is a resource. And what it is with as much as is happening in the sector now, the shale play revolution, where we're almost to 90 billion cubic feet of natural gas production per day in the US alone, is incredible. It's unprecedented. 20 years ago, we thought we were running out of natural gas or it was going to be harder to find. It was harder to find, but the technology answered the call. And so we're going to have sessions this year for the first time ever on LNG projects. And what that does, that ties the US into other places such as Vietnam, the Caribbean, Africa, even Europe, where you can take this liquefied natural gas and you can ship it to places, and it can be regasified, used as heating or power generation. So we're going to be looking at those topics. We're going to look at every form of it. I think we've got some great wind content, excuse me. Wendy's involved with a lot of the great renewable contact and help come up with some of those sessions. We're glad to be talking about onshore and offshore. in particular. That's very exciting. I think it's a very new area in the U.S., very undeveloped, but it's headed that way. And I think what Dan was saying about on-site power is fantastic. I mean, here's the thing, we have, I think, 11 or 12 microgrid sessions, and you really can't have a microgrid without a generator. And everywhere you go, whether it's a data center, Google, Amazon, Facebook, those are going to have on-site generators. So that is a big area. And the way that sector is evolving and sort of merging with what we would call conventional power generation, where you're looking at these engines that can be used to do load following in West Texas, where you have a lot of wind. So this is all tying in together. And I think that's where POWERGEN is really unique, is that it is covering all of this ground, not only separately, but where it overlaps.
Agreed. It's covering so much ground that there are so many different technologies, fuel sources, and I think it was Dan or maybe Wendy said it earlier in terms of, sometimes we kind of go, in the ideal world, we'd be all decarbonized already, and we'd all be using God knows what, coal fusion or something, but they haven't invented it yet. And I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of coal, but there are parts of the world where even if they wanted to get rid of coal, they can't right now. And, one of the first question I'll throw out to you guys, just in terms of the discussion, the whole event is around the energy revolution. And I spend my time looking at new technologies. And Dan, you mentioned, you have all sort of mechanical things for energy storage, and you have battery chemistry technology and digital and materials that are used for making things more efficient. So the amount of technology and innovation coming at the energy industry is I in the world I live in, people go, Kev, please stop, right? There's too many new things. So we talk about within the industry, it's a complete revolution. But let me play devil's advocate. You then go out on the streets and you talk to the general public, and you see all the stuff with Fridays for Futures, and regardless of your political debates or affiliations worldwide, there are people out there going, we're not going fast enough. So are we really in a revolution, or are we in a bit of a bubble?
I'll answer that. I think we really are seeing the transition again happening faster in certain parts of the world, but the fundamental issue is here, and a lot of it's driven by the cost of solar and the cost of wind. Those technologies, and really it's, I think everyone would like the world to move to a cleaner energy source, but we really are moving to cleaner energy through the fundamental economics of the market, which I think is a good thing, versus having to, originally the US subsidized wind and has some subsidies in solar, but we're moving away from those subsidies as the technologies have matured and their costs have come down. So, the world is really moving in the right direction. I think there's always going to be someone that would like to see it happen faster, but it also has to be economic. In some places, you can't afford to make those changes that quickly.
I think Dan's right on in terms of cost, and I think in addition to cost of new technologies are going to be true market drivers to an energy revolution. I'm going to go out there and say I believe we are at the beginning of an energy revolution, and we're starting to see it. Is it going to happen this year? No. Is it going to be long term? Are there going to be we're going to have our traditional sources of energy for a while. And it's going to be a transition, but some of the drivers, like I said, they will include the new technologies, those being demonstrated and proven. Some of the market drivers will be for, the fires in California, some of the things that are out of our control. These will also be big drivers. I do agree also with that we're going to start seeing a lot more distributed energy and microgrids in our future. But I also think that the utilities themselves are going to really help be part of the energy revolution. You know, I chaired a panel early this year and I had Con Ed and AEP on my panel, and it was really interesting to hear how they are embracing and looking at new innovations, which is really counter to the traditional utility model. So it seems like the changing dynamics in the energy landscape are forcing utilities to modernize and look for ways to increase power and ensure resiliency. So I think looking forward, I'm also looking forward to hearing how some of these, you know, more utilities are bringing in new technologies into the fold and changing their business models, because I think all of that feeds into it.
I agree. When you look at, like, I'll use National Grid Partners as an example. I believe AEP, various utilities are developing sort of what we would call venture capital or new technology wings that are investing in new companies, whether it's digital or renewable. And you know, at the end of the day, I think the utilities look at what the customer wants, and the customer says, well, I want clean power, but I want to make sure my lights come on, and I want to make sure it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg. And I think the technologies that are being developed in parallel with these headline getting resources, whether it's wind and solar or microgrids, I think the technologies and software and mechanically speaking are helping push that along. I think we're going to see all of these things go to a cleaner future and be more resilient at the same time.
It is fascinating to see it up close, and you know, Dan mentioned the pace of change, and even in the US, right? A lot of us, I'm over on the other side of the pond. You look at the US and we go, oh, the US is one country, and then you figure out that, oh, all the states are different and they have different policies, and there's different natural resources and different regulations and different society goals and cost models and rate cases and whatever. So, and you see what works in Texas compared to what works in Oregon, what works in New York, right? And there's no one size fits all. But I'd like to come back. Wendy, you brought it up at the start in terms of looking at how base load is changing, if you like, in terms of, you know, I live in France, and for the last 19 years, most of the base load here is nuclear, right? And the lights stay on. But it is changing. Do you see that? Is it changing? You mentioned it's changing. Is it changing slowly? Is it going to get faster? You know, again, there's no one size fits all, but do we still need massive storage technologies like, I don't know, hydrogen or ammonia, or somebody invents some new battery thingy?
I think it is changing, and I think it's going to be slow. I echo what Dan said earlier. It's going to take its time. I think with all of the goals that various governments and utilities are putting out there towards, you know, we talked about 100% carbon-free goals. You know, we're looking at long-term goals to actually get there. I think it's going to be on the energy storage side and all of the above. We are going to need some of these great big energy storage technologies. I think even lithium ion has its place right now, and I think it's going to be there for a while. And even I think we're going to see a lot more, like Dan said, a lot more hybrid microgrids coming in, because we're still going to be, you know, relying on some of our traditional resources, combining those. I believe it's going to be an all of the above strategy, at least on the storage side.
Yeah, let me jump in, add a little bit to that. We've got one of our papers deals with presenting Hawaii and their resource planning for Hawaii. And what they have determined is that Hawaii is going to 100% renewables, but there's still a thermal component that will always be required. And for instance, Wärtsilä, we have a plant in Hawaii. It's reciprocating engines, but it runs on biodiesel. It's a renewable component of thermal energy. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is you can install, say, on-site generation with reciprocating engines, and the future we're looking at is those engines can be run on synthetic fuels that are really derived from hydrogen that's generated from excess solar production. So I think the world is really a lot of people. There are some really forward thinkers out there, and you know, we hope some of those topics are going to be shared at PowerGen, and I think that's why it's going to be exciting to participate this year, and so I'm looking forward to it.
And the last topic, because obviously we're not going to do PowerGen here because we'll be here for 3 days, but you mentioned as well, and again, this is my outside in looking view. I see what's the terrible things that are going on in California, and I might be wrong, but you know, people always for the last nearly 100 years, well, the utility was there, I flick a switch, the lights come on. And they only complain when the lights weren't on. And to be honest, the utility industry never even told them how it worked because look, just pay the bill for grand. And so there was this kind of thing going on. And then suddenly it's like, oh, what do you mean the power doesn't work? And it's complex. But what's happening in California, is that accelerating the talk around resiliency? And you know what? We do need to decentralize more. We do need local power sources. So whether that's a small gas turbine in the neighborhood as opposed to the big power plant in the corner, if we can't have solar, I don't know. Do you expect that to be a kind of a topic this year?
I think this will definitely be a topic, and I think this speaks to the need of preparedness, not only from the utilities, but also on the business side. I think that the microgrids are going to be the really important tools to adding resiliency, and I think being prepared and having those in place is quickly becoming a standard part of doing business. If you know, utilities have been thinking about this for a while. They're addressing it now, but businesses now, if they weren't planning for it before, I think they are now, as part of their day-to-day business survival and models.
Yeah, actually, one of our papers for on-site power generation in the innovation section is about the city of Glendale, California, where they just recently, a couple months ago, voted to, instead of looking at a large gas turbine combined cycle project 3 years ago, they are now looking at a 75 megawatt energy storage project and 95 megawatts of reciprocating engines. So they have that reliability, and then additional 50 megawatts of local sources of distributed generation such as solar. But that's real today with that on-site generation becoming important even in California, that may still include a thermal component, and those engines eventually could run on synthetic fuels that are renewable.
And I think Kevin and everyone, I think part of this is a T&D issue as well, which is kind of a distributech topic. I heard the governor the other day talk about the utilities undergrounding, you know, to prevent some of these things, but the cost there would be I can't even imagine how many billions of dollars that would be. So what I see is, you know, if I lived in California on the East Coast or the Gulf Coast, you know, having a generator, or certainly having this blending of the conventional big type of baseload plant and the on-site power sort of, you know, more evenly spaced. I'm hearing the same thing like with data centers, instead of the massive data centers, that a lot of companies are going to go to smaller, more frequently located data centers. And I think you'll see that with generation as well. It'll make it more adaptive to, you know, the influx of renewables, and also more resilient, hopefully, with these weather events.
Yeah, it is fascinating to see I suppose the amount of different inputs that are coming in, whether it's, you know, Dan, you mentioned that, you know, regardless of the technology, here's a community deciding, hey, look, we're going to do something different. The technology's there. And it's not some big top-down government thing. It's the community deciding for itself. So there's no one size fits all, but it's going to be fascinating. And we've just scratched the surface on these things, right, in 20 minutes. So you can imagine the conversations at whatever, on stands and summits and corridors and bars at PowerGen. Before we go, one final question to each of you. What's the one thing you're looking forward to at PowerGen this year? Wendy?
Oh, one is hard. I might sneak in two. The hubs were great last year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the renewable tracks and the storage tracks on the hubs this year. But I also want to give a shout out to the Initiate Tech Showcase for startups. I'm excited to see what new innovations are coming out of that showcase.
And Dan?
Yes, well, I'm really looking forward to it. I think on the on-site generation track, you know, we've got some new technologies that I think people are going to want to hear about. And then, you know, I would actually encourage people to sign up for these sessions, not just attend the exhibit floor, but I think our sessions are very good, and there's a lot of value in attending the main sessions at PowerGen this year. And, you know, we're excited to have it in New Orleans. I'm looking forward to the good food and the good music, and I think it's going to be a great venue this year, and encourage everyone to come down and let the good times roll.
Agreed. And Rod?
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing Archie Manning, football legend, a New Orleans legend as well. One of my heroes growing up as a quarterback with the Saints. I think he'll add a little something different to the festivities. There's going to be some surprises in New Orleans that are very specific to that city that we're going to have at PowerGen. So I'd encourage people to be at the keynote. I think the natural gas hub is going to be interesting here in the LNG conversation. Also, I think the microgrids and the wind content's going on. Great on-site power, and the digital transformation is going to be excellent.
Well, I have two quick ones. The first one is the week before I'll be at PowerGen Europe, your sister conference over here. And hydrogen is kind of
right
flavor of the month over here right now. So I'm curious to see at PowerGen International how much talk about hydrogen, power to gas, ammonia, and all that stuff's going on.
We are going to have sessions on that. In fact, there's going to be the Italian trade delegation is going to have a session on hydrogen where they're going to include Ansaldo Energia. I believe Man Energy Solutions is going to be there, and our own Patty Young with Clarion Energy, who's an expert on gas-fired generation, is going to be talking about that. We're going to have Mitsubishi Hitachi. I believe some of the other major players are certainly looking into hydrogen, and those are going to be some topics within the hubs as well.
And very quickly before we wrap, my other one, I kind of live by the thing is I don't know what I don't know. So wandering around the Initiate with all the startups, wandering around some of the traditional players, and they have new technologies, new mechanics, new materials, new whatever, and it's like, ooh, I never knew that. So I don't know what I don't know. So I typically come away with a list of things that now I do know I don't know about, but I need to go figure out. Rod, back to you for the closing words.
Yeah, we just want to welcome everybody and hopefully come to New Orleans to see everything. There's a ton of stuff to do. There's more than, I believe it's more than 80 sessions altogether. And obviously it's a great city, as Dan mentioned, great food, great music, good time to network. We'll have a thing at the Mardi Gras World, which is the place where they put together the floats for Mardi Gras. That'll be a lot of fun. And it's going to be great networking opportunities. So we just would love to see everybody there.
Hey, see you all in New Orleans.